The Wisdom of Benjamin Franklin. 2 Questions to Test Someone's True Loyalty. Quotes Library. Opening. There is a kind of pain that does not announce itself loudly. It does not arrive with the drama of a betrayal you saw coming or the sting of an enemy who finally showed their hand. It arrives quietly, in the middle of an ordinary moment, when you realize that the person sitting across from you, the one you trusted with your plans, your fears, your private victories, was never really on your side. They were present. They were friendly. They used the right words at the right times. But they were not loyal. And by the time you understood that, you had already given them access to parts of your life that should have been protected. Benjamin Franklin, statesman, inventor, philosopher, and one of the most psychologically astute minds in American history, understood the complexity of human loyalty long before most people were willing to name it. He lived in a world where alliances were fragile, where friends could become rivals overnight, where the person who shook your hand in the morning could undermine you by evening. He navigated courts, printing houses, diplomatic chambers, and political assemblies filled with people whose loyalties were not always what they claimed. And through decades of careful observation, he developed a practical wisdom about human nature that was not naive, not cynical, but precise. Franklin believed that loyalty was not something a person declared. It was something a person demonstrated, often in the smallest, most unguarded moments. And he believed that if you knew what to look for, you could test the true nature of someone's loyalty long before it was ever put under real pressure. This video is about 2 of the most powerful questions you can use to do exactly that. Not interrogation techniques, not manipulation, not paranoid surveillance of the people around you, but 2 thoughtful, philosophically grounded tests, drawn from the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin, that reveal the true character of the people in your inner circle before you have paid the price of trusting the wrong ones. If you are someone who values authentic relationships, who has been burned before by misplaced trust, or who simply wants to build a life surrounded by people who are genuinely in your corner, this is the video you have been waiting for. And before we go a single step further, if this channel has ever given you a thought that stayed with you, a perspective that shifted something, a piece of wisdom that arrived exactly when you needed it, subscribe to Quotes Library right now. Hit that bell. We are building a community of people who take their relationships, their character, and their growth seriously. You belong here. Now, let us begin. WHO was Benjamin Franklin, and why should you trust his wisdom on loyalty? Before we enter the 2 questions, we need to sit for a moment with the man who gave us the framework. Because Benjamin Franklin was not simply a historical figure whose face appears on currency. He was a living laboratory of human psychology, a man who, through his own extraordinary life, accumulated a depth of understanding about people that most of us will never be forced to develop, because we will never move through the complexity of environments that he did. Franklin was born in 1706 in Boston, the 15th child of a candle and soap maker. By any conventional standard of his era, he had no business becoming one of the most influential figures of the 18th century. He had no formal education beyond the age of 10. He had no inherited wealth, no aristocratic connections, no institutional backing. What he had was an insatiable hunger to understand the world, ideas, science, and above all, people. He taught himself to write by copying the essays of great writers and then reconstructing them from memory. He taught himself the principles of electricity through direct experimentation at a time when most men of his class were not expected to think scientifically at all. He built a printing business from almost nothing into one of the most respected publishing enterprises in colonial America. And he did all of this while navigating a world dense with rivals, envious competitors, shifting political alliances, and the constant threat of betrayal. What makes Franklin uniquely qualified to speak on loyalty is that he was betrayed, genuinely, painfully, consequentially betrayed, more than once. His own son, William, remained loyal to the British Crown during the American Revolution, severing one of the closest relationships of Franklin's life. Business partners disappointed him. Diplomatic allies shifted their positions when it became convenient. Friends in the colonial assemblies became opponents when power dynamics changed. But Franklin did not respond to betrayal with bitterness or with paranoia. He responded with analysis. He studied the patterns. He identified the tells. He distilled his understanding into the kind of aphoristic, practical wisdom that became the foundation of his famous Poor Richard's Almanac and his autobiographical reflections. His goal was never to become someone who trusted no one. His goal was to become someone who trusted wisely. That distinction, Between closing yourself off from trust and refining your ability to extend it correctly, is the foundation of everything we are about to explore. Franklin's wisdom is not a defensive manual for the suspicious. It is a navigational tool for the discerning. What is loyalty, and why is it so hard to measure? Before we can test loyalty, we have to understand what we are actually testing for. Because loyalty is one of those words that nearly everyone agrees is important and almost no one defines with precision. We use it to mean many different things: fidelity, consistency, dependability, advocacy, discretion, sacrifice. And because the word carries so much weight and so little specific meaning, it becomes one of the easiest things in the world to falsely perform. A person can look deeply loyal without being loyal at all. They can show up reliably when showing up costs them nothing. They can speak warmly of you when speaking warmly of you serves their reputation. They can defend you loudly in rooms where defending you is safe and popular, and fall completely silent in the rooms where it would cost them something. This is not loyalty. This is the performance of loyalty, and it is one of the most common and most costly mistakes a person can make in their relationships, mistaking the performance for the real thing. Benjamin Franklin observed this pattern across every domain of human life. In business, he watched men pledge partnership and dissolve at the moment a better offer appeared. In politics, he watched alliances forged with passionate speeches crumble under the first real test of consequence. In personal relationships, he watched friendships that seemed unshakable reveal themselves as entirely contingent on ease and comfort. His conclusion was not that loyalty does not exist. His conclusion was that genuine loyalty is rarer than people want to believe, and that the only way to identify it is to observe behavior, not declarations. Real loyalty, in the Franklinite sense, has three core components. The first is consistency. The person behaves the same way toward you whether or not there is an audience, whether or not you are present, whether or not it costs them anything. The second is advocacy. The person actively supports your interest, not just passively refrains from harming it. They speak well of you when it would be easier to stay silent or to subtly undermine. The third is sacrifice. When a real test comes, when loyalty requires giving something up, the truly loyal person pays that price. Not cheerfully, necessarily. Not without difficulty, but they pay it. Most people who present themselves as loyal meet the first condition on a good day, occasionally meet the second, and have never been truly tested on the third. That is not a moral judgment, it is simply the reality of human psychology. And it is precisely why Franklin's two questions matter so much. The first question: what do they say about you when you are not in the room? Franklin captured this principle in one of his most direct and enduring observations about human nature. He understood that the truest measure of a person's loyalty to you is not what they say in your presence, but what they say in your absence. This is not a quote you can pin to a single line in his writing. It is a principle woven throughout his entire philosophy of character and social wisdom. And it is the most revealing test of loyalty that exists. Think about what happens in the average human social environment. When you are present, almost everyone has an incentive to treat you well. Social pressure, the desire to avoid conflict, the instinct toward courtesy, the presence of mutual acquaintances, all of these forces push people toward civility in your company. Even your enemies can be polite to your face. Even people who secretly resent you can perform warmth convincingly in a shared room. Presence does not reveal loyalty. Absence does. Franklin knew this because he operated in environments where the conversations behind closed doors were often more consequential than the ones conducted in official settings. He knew that the whisper in the corridor often did more political damage than the speech on the floor. He knew that a word dropped quietly, in the right ear, in the right moment, could unravel relationships, reputations, and opportunities, and that the person doing the whispering could walk back into the room with a smile that revealed nothing. So the first question you must ask, not of the person you are testing, but of yourself, through careful observation, is, what does this person say about me when I am not there to hear it? Now, you might immediately object, how can I possibly know what someone says about me behind my back? And the answer is, not perfectly, not always, but more often than you think, if you learn how to read the signals. The first signal is what other people carry back to you. Loyal people, when they hear someone speak poorly of you in your absence, will tell you. They may soften it, they may frame it carefully, but they will find a way to let you know. Disloyal people will stay silent, or worse, participate. Pay attention to who brings you information, and who withholds it. The second signal is behavior change. When someone is speaking about you negatively in private, there is often a subtle shift in how they engage with you in public. A slight increase in distance. A reduction in the warmth they once showed. A new carefulness in what they share with you. People who are saying one thing behind you and another thing to your face are carrying the weight of that contradiction, and it shows, if you are paying attention. The third signal is the pattern of what they say about others in your presence. Franklin was a keen observer of this principle. The person who speaks badly about others to you will speak badly about you to others. This is almost without exception. If someone in your circle consistently brings you gossip about mutual friends, their failures, their embarrassments, their private struggles, do not make the mistake of thinking you are special. You are simply the current audience. And when you are gone, you become the content. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition. And Benjamin Franklin, who built one of the most successful public careers of his era precisely because he understood the social patterns around him, would tell you that your ability to read these signals is not optional. It is a survival skill. Ask yourself honestly, when the people in your inner circle are in conversations you are not part of, what version of you do they present to the world? Do they speak of your ambitions with respect, even when respecting you is not the easy or popular choice in that room? Do they correct mischaracterizations of your character when they hear them? Do they defend you in your absence the way they claim to support you in your presence? The answers to those questions will tell you more about the true nature of your relationships than years of pleasant interaction ever could. We are at the heart of this video, and if you have been nodding along, if any of this is landing close to experiences you have actually lived, then you already understand why this content matters. This channel exists to give you the philosophical and practical tools to navigate your relationships with wisdom, not just with hope. Subscribe to Quotes Library right now if you have not already. Share this video. Every person who finds this channel is one more person choosing depth, discernment, and genuine wisdom over comfortable illusions. Now, let us go into the second question. The second question, what do they do when helping you costs them something? The first question tests what a person says. The second question tests what a person does. And while the first question is revealing, the second question is definitive. It is the question that eliminates all ambiguity. Because anyone can be a loyal friend when loyalty is free. The true measure of a person's commitment to you is what they are willing to give up. In time, in comfort, in social capital, in opportunity, in personal cost, in order to stand by you. Benjamin Franklin wrote with characteristic directness, "A friend in need is a friend indeed." This aphorism is so familiar that most people have stopped hearing it. It has become wallpaper, present but invisible, repeated without being truly understood. But Franklin was not writing a greeting card sentiment. He was offering a diagnostic tool. He was saying, the person who shows up when showing up is easy as giving you incomplete information. Wait, watch. The friend in need reveals the friend indeed. What does it mean, in practical terms, for helping you to cost someone something? It means the moment you call and they are busy, genuinely busy, with their own pressures and obligations, and they rearrange their life to show up for you anyway. It means the moment you need someone to speak on your behalf in a difficult room, where speaking for you carries social risk, where silence would be safer and easier, and they speak anyway. It means the moment your reputation is under attack and the easiest thing in the world would be for the people around you to stay quiet, to avoid the association, and the truly loyal person refuses to be quiet. Franklin understood the economics of loyalty with a precision that feels almost modern. He recognized that human beings are fundamentally self-interested, not in a cynical sense, but in a realistic one. Every person you know is navigating their own pressures, their own ambitions, their own social calculations. That is not a flaw. It is simply human. The question is not whether people are self-interested. The question is, when their self-interest and your need for loyalty come into direct conflict, which one wins? In the people who genuinely love you and are genuinely loyal to you, the answer, not always, not without cost, but consistently, is that your need wins. They do not abandon their self-interest permanently. They suspend it in the critical moment. When the cost is real and the temptation to step back is present, they step forward instead. Franklin experienced this test in some of the most consequential moments in history. During the American Revolution, Loyalty to the cause of independence carried genuine risk. Not just social discomfort, but the real possibility of imprisonment, financial ruin, or death. And what Franklin observed in those years was that a man's true character, and the true nature of every alliance he had built, was revealed not by what they signed in peaceful times but by what they stood by when the cost became real. He watched men he had considered friends distance themselves when the political winds shifted. He watched others, men he had perhaps underestimated, step forward with a steadiness that was more eloquent than any speech. And the lesson he carried forward was this: do not judge the loyalty of the people around you by how they behave in the easy seasons of your life. Reserve your deepest trust for those who have demonstrated, through action rather than declaration, that they will stand with you when standing with you is not the comfortable choice. How do you apply this practically, before the great crisis comes? You look at the small moments. Because the small moments are actually the most honest. The great crisis is rare. The small moments of cost are constant. Watch what happens when you ask for something that genuinely inconveniences someone. Watch whether they help you grudgingly, transactionally, in a way that makes you feel the weight of what you are costing them, or whether they give freely, without keeping a running ledger. Watch what happens when your schedule conflicts with theirs and a compromise is needed. Watch whether the compromise always seems to favor their comfort. Watch whether their investment in your life is proportional to their investment in their own, or whether you are always the one giving more, stretching more, accommodating more. Franklin wrote extensively about reciprocity, not in the sense of cold transaction, but in the sense of the natural exchange that defines healthy human relationships. A loyal person does not calculate every interaction down to the last unit of effort. But over time, in the overall pattern of the relationship, there is a rough equilibrium. Both people stretch, both people sacrifice, both people give something that costs them when the other needs it. If that equilibrium does not exist, if you are consistently the one extending yourself while the other person remains comfortable, that is not a loyalty imbalance you should explain away. That is information. The second question, then, is this: when helping you would cost this person something real, time, comfort, reputation, opportunity, money, ease, do they help anyway? Not once. Not in one dramatic moment that they reference forever afterward. But as a pattern, as a consistent demonstration of where their priorities actually live. That is the test, and it is not gentle. But neither is the pain of misplaced trust. What Franklin understood about the people who fail these tests. Having walked through both questions, it is important to sit with what Franklin believed about the people who fail them. Because the natural human response to discovering that someone in your life is not truly loyal is one of two extremes, either to excuse it entirely or to condemn it entirely. Franklin's wisdom occupies the more nuanced and ultimately more useful space between those two responses. He understood that most people who fail the loyalty test are not villains. They are simply human. They are prioritizing themselves, which is, in most circumstances, their default setting. The problem is not that they are self-interested. The problem is that they have allowed you to believe that their interest includes you, when in fact you are only conditionally included. Welcome in their world when your presence is comfortable or advantageous, but not when it costs them anything meaningful. Franklin called this category of person a fair-weather friend, another phrase so familiar it has lost its sharpness. But what he meant was precise: a person whose loyalty exists only in the absence of real conditions. When the sun is shining, they are warm. When the storm arrives, they retreat. And the tragedy is not that such people exist, they always have and always will. The tragedy is when we build our most important decisions, our most vulnerable disclosures, our deepest plans around people who were only ever available for the easy parts. His counsel was not to hate these people or to cut them from your life with bitterness. His counsel was to recalibrate, to adjust the level of access you grant them, to recognize what they are genuinely capable of offering: companionship in comfortable times, perhaps, or professional collegiality, or a pleasant social presence, and to appreciate that for what it is. But to stop expecting from them what they have demonstrated they cannot provide. This recalibration is not cold, it is not cynical. It is, in the Franklinite sense, the ultimate act of practical wisdom, the ability to see people clearly, appreciate what they genuinely offer, and organize your trust accordingly. How to build the kind of loyalty these questions are testing for. Franklin was never a passive observer of virtue. He believed in its active cultivation. And so we cannot close this conversation without turning the lens around. because the wisdom of these two questions is not only for assessing others, it is also for assessing yourself. Are you the kind of person who speaks well of the people you care about when they are not in the room? Not just when it is easy or when the room is already friendly toward them, but when the conversation turns, when the atmosphere shifts, when speaking well of them would mark you as different from the crowd. Are you the kind of person who shows up when showing up costs something? Not just in the grand gestures that feel good and look impressive, but in the ordinary, invisible moments of cost, when no one would notice if you stepped back, when the person you were loyal to would never know what it took for you to stay. These are the questions Franklin would ask you to hold about yourself, not to produce guilt, but to produce growth. Because the quality of the loyalty you receive is deeply connected to the quality of the loyalty you model. Not in a transactional sense. Good loyalty does not automatically attract good loyalty in return. But in the sense that the standards you hold for your own character tend to attract people who hold similar standards, and to filter out people who do not. Franklin built his character deliberately. He famously created a list of 13 virtues, including sincerity, justice, and humility, and tracked his progress on each one with rigorous daily self-examination. What is less often discussed is that this practice was not only about personal morality. It was about building the kind of inner life that could generate and sustain the kind of relationships that mattered. He understood that character attracts character. That the person who has done the work of becoming trustworthy tends, over time, to find themselves surrounded by trustworthy people, because they recognize each other, and because they create the conditions in which real loyalty can exist. Do the work on yourself first. Become the person whose loyalty could pass both tests. And then, from that foundation, apply the wisdom of the questions to the people around you. To the person who has been burned before. There is someone watching this right now who needed to hear this long ago. You trusted the wrong person. You opened a door that should have stayed closed, gave access to a space that was sacred, and the person you trusted, the one who smiled and said all the right things, proved, when it mattered, that they were not who you believed them to be. And the damage was not just the betrayal itself. The damage was what the betrayal did to your relationship with trust. It made you tighter, more guarded, more reluctant to let anyone close. Because if you misjudged that person, someone you were so sure about, how can you trust your own judgment again? Benjamin Franklin's answer to that question is one of the most compassionate and practically useful things his philosophy offers. Your judgment was not broken. Your method was incomplete. You were reading the right data, their words, their warmth, their presence, but you were not yet equipped with the questions that reveal the data words can hide. You were not asking what they said about you when you were gone. You were not watching carefully enough for what they did when helping you cost them something. That is not a failure of your heart. That is a gap in your method. And now you have a better method. This does not mean you open yourself recklessly again. It does not mean you pretend the pain of past betrayal has no wisdom in it, because it does. Caution earned through experience is not the same as fear. Franklin was cautious. He was also one of the most deeply connected men of his era, a man with genuine, tested, enduring friendships and alliances that held through some of the most turbulent events in the history of the Western world. He did not let past betrayal make him close. He let it make him discerning. That is the goal, not a closed heart, a discerning one. Closing. Benjamin Franklin gave us two questions that cut through the social performance of loyalty and reveal its true substance. The first, what does this person say about you when you are not in the room? The second, what does this person do when helping you costs them something? These are not easy questions to sit with. They require you to watch carefully, to think clearly, and sometimes to accept truths about people you care about that are uncomfortable to acknowledge. But the discomfort of honest assessment is always less costly, in the end, than the pain of misplaced trust. Franklin spent a lifetime navigating the complexity of human relationships with wisdom rather than wishful thinking. He was not perfect. No philosopher or statesman ever is, but the framework he left us is one of the most practically powerful tools for building a life surrounded by people who are genuinely worthy of the trust you place in them. You deserve that kind of life. You deserve an inner circle of people who speak well of you when you are absent, who step forward when stepping forward is costly, who make you feel, not just in the good seasons, but in the difficult ones, that you are not carrying your story alone. Use these questions. Apply them with patience and with fairness. Give the people in your life the opportunity to demonstrate what they are made of before you make final judgments. And as you do, Hold yourself to the same standard. Be the person whose loyalty passes both tests. Build the character that attracts the character you are looking for. That is the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin. That is the work of a life lived with genuine discernment. If this video added something to you today, if it gave you a framework, a perspective, a word for something you have been feeling but could not name, please subscribe to Quotes Library right now. Leave a comment below and tell me which of these two questions hit closest to home for you. Share this video with someone who is trying to figure out who they can truly count on. Every subscriber, every share, every comment builds this community of people who are choosing wisdom over illusion, depth over surface, and genuine connection over comfortable pretense. We are building something real here. Come be part of it. Stay wise. Stay discerning. And as always, keep becoming. Quotes Library.